All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne, and it's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. Today we are jamming with Francesca Brunsden, who is a trained life coach, proficient in human design, neuro-linguistic programming, and emotional freedom techniques, EFT, tapping. She offers a distinctive coaching experience that blends energy work, human design, and practical mindset tools. Well, we're going to get along just fine. Francesca, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Me too. So let's jump right in. But before we can do that, I've got to ask that first question, and that's just, when I strip away the bio and all the stuff that you do and the work and whatnot, just who are you? Who are you as the human?
Wow. I feel like I haven't been asked that in a while. Who am I as a human? Well, as a human, I'm a wife. I'm a mother of 4 children, 3 living. I am British, if you can't tell by the accent or if it confuses anyone. I've been living here in Canada for 9 years, almost 10, which feels like, wow. I mean, we was never meant to stay or put down roots, let alone, have Canadian children and essentially emigrate. So, it was very unexpected for me to be living here. It was unexpected for me to change careers. And so I started out as a hairstylist, which when I look back, it was like an armchair therapist, really, who got to do something creative all day with people and, see so many different types of humans come through the door. And I just loved that. And then life had its way of unfolding in marvelous, unexpected and different ways than I'd imagined. And I find myself in Canada waking up sometimes being like, is this a suburb of the UK?
That's hilarious.
So yeah, and I feel like self-development and, the human condition has always been something that fascinates me. But I don't know, I have lots of other passions like music. I don't know, we'll get into human design, but I'm a manifesting generator. So if anyone who knows what that means, it means that you kind of have all of these different passions and you put them together. So I've been someone that's always like, ooh, what's that? I'll try that. Ooh, what's that? I'll try that. So my current love is painting for the sake of painting. I'm no artiste, but I certainly have a creative side. So that's some of my humanness.
Is there a characteristic or a trait that you identify with that you feel like you've really evolved in over the years? 'Cause I feel like a who are you question is, of course there are fundamental things that, I think we could all identify as the entirety of our life to this point. But then there are, I really do, if I were to ask you this same question, 3 years from now, I'm sure it'll have evolved a little bit, right? Or some subtleties would have changed. So I'm curious if, knowing that, a little bit about your backstory and some of which you alluded to, there's been some big change, in your
huge
life, obviously. So what, around the who are you question or any of those kind of fundamental characteristics, what have been some of those things that have evolved rapidly, I guess you can say, over the last few years?
Evolved rapidly, I would say, is the sort of sense of self, like not looking outside of myself so much, trying to fit in, and more just like, oh, this is who I am. I would say that's evolved a lot. But I would say certain things have definitely evolved, but stayed the same. So I've always been creative. I've always been someone who wanted to do something different to everyone else. Like, I've never had a corporate job. I've never really had like a job that, your parents understand what it is or what you actually do, or that it's always like kind of strayed on the outskirts of like normal. So I think it's kind of, now that you're asking that question, I think there's certain things that have stayed the same in essence and have changed in the ways that they manifest in my life. And then there's other things that are more really about who I am that has evolved hugely. Like, and I think that, I don't know, it probably comes with growing older. Like, children is such a big pursuit, often.
Well said.
It's a pursuit, and then you're like, whoa, I'm in this like hardcore role that I'm so underprepared for. And for me, I had children in such quick succession, so that was just so intense. And yeah, I think that threw me into a lot of self-discovery. And so I think the thing that changed the most is my sense of self, I think.
Okay.
Probably, yeah.
And so, and what's some of the, why don't we get into, before we get into the work, like what's some of the backstory? How, because I think you spent a couple decades, right, as a hairstylist in the UK and so forth. Like, so
yeah,
what was life like during those 20 years, you know, and like, how did you get here? I guess
how did I get here? So I was one of literally a handful of people in my secondary school or sixth form. I don't know what it correlates to here, but you know, when you're like 17, 18, deciding if you're going to university, I was like, not going to university was just like not a thing. Like my parents expected it. School were just like prepping you to get all the forms sorted to go and what one you're going to get into. And I had like a crisis of like, what the hell am I going to do? I don't want to do any of that. I thought I was going to do like history of art or something like that. And anyway, I had one of those moments where I had to really think about what I wanted to do and kind of fight against the world around me. And that was kind of one of the first moments in my life where I had to really think about me versus what was expected of me. And I wanted to get into film, and I thought that looked like a traditional role, going to hair school, all of that. So I kind of started along that road, absolutely hated it, and realized that I wanted to be like in a workplace. So as luck would have it, like it was the first moment for me where like the stars fully aligned. I was like, I want to work at the best salon there is, and we'll start from the top and work our way down. And somehow I got a job at the salon that I wanted to work in the most. And it was an incredible experience. It was like my friends at the time who were at university used to call it like the hair army.
Okay.
Because I was there like working full shifts for minimum wage all day in an amazing salon. But then after work at like 7, 8 o'clock, we would start our training, and I would often not get home till midnight. And I had to provide all of my own hair models, and it was intense. I think in the 4 years it took me to train, only like maybe a handful of other people made it. And it was incredible. Like, it was incredible. Like, the guy I worked for at the time was the Queen's hairdresser. He then employed the Queen's hairdresser. So we had all sorts of celebrities in. So it was a fascinating place to work. And I kind of dropped the whole idea of working in film, but I wanted to like combine that with makeup and hair. And I kind of just worked my way around what I considered the best salons in London. And I had a great time.
Sure.
If I'm honest, I was like I had like not a bird's eye view, what's it called? Like a fly on the wall of like being a celebrity hairstylist without having the pressure of like being their celebrity hairstylist. So how it works behind the scenes is often they get their hair for free and you get the promotion. And this was in the days before Instagram and taking photos and that kind of thing. So it would be like your name in a magazine or whatever. God, that makes me sound old, doesn't it?
Not at all.
I remember taking Polaroids of like cool haircuts. Anyway, so yeah, I had a great time being like backstage on film, backstage on like, you know, the equivalent of like morning TV in the UK, and getting to do all these really cool experiences, travel, and just have a great time. But
is there a moment that like just comes to mind that, I'm sure you've had many of them, but one of those like kind of pinch me, sit back and be like, I can't believe, like, is this actually happening right now? Like, what's going on?
There's a couple of them. I think there was a couple, like we had, I can't even remember which one of the Beatles it was, would like come in, and his son, George, I think it was George Harrison's son, he would come in and get his haircut, and sometimes you'd be like, I can't believe who this is. Like, play it cool, and I'd be sweating. Or another really standout
Don't cut his ear off.
Yeah, like I'd be like just washing his hair and like sweating like a pig. Another really standout moment was being asked it sounds way cooler than it is. What it actually was very different. There's a Britney Spears video called if you seek Amy, and obviously if you say that fast, it says something else. And
Yeah.
it's a very like, it's not one of her popular songs, but I got asked to come and help with the hair, and she wasn't even there, but I didn't know it at the time. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be doing it. Like, I'm going to be in Britney Spears' video, but it was actually the news reporter at the very beginning, and she has this horrible, like, flicky out bob, and she's meant to look like an overdone news reporter. And anyway, that was
Okay.
me. So I was like, that's my claim to fame.
That's hilarious. That's funny.
But yeah, that was kind of it. There's a few
Okay,
other,
so it sounds like
yeah.
it was fulfilling,
Mm.
energizing. Like, what changed, I guess, or how did you get to? Why are you in Canada? What's going on? It seems like
I
things were
know.
really
How
rolling
did
in the
I
UK.
get here? Again, another very serendipitous moment. Me and my husband had both got to kind of points in our career. We'd just got married. We'd bought a house. We was like, kind of like, are we going to have kids? Like, you know, when you're like kind of thinking about what's next,
Yeah.
but you haven't really made any moves. And we were both probably like, okay, we're done pretty well, but like, now what? We're not going to stay in this situation forever. My job was very unfamily friendly.
Yeah.
We were both like heavily commissioned in our roles, and he sort of felt like someone in his company needed to like basically die or retire
Yeah.
before
Okay.
for him to get a promotion. And no one looked like they were doing either of those things. So we were both looking at options, and one Friday night in a pub, he was like, okay, here's a list of countries I can get promoted and move to, and there's pretty sweet deal if we go, and we can just do it for 2 years. And I was like, immediately no. And I kept saying, if like something out of the blue happens, like maybe I'll consider it. And we had like a series of weird, like personal life things going on to do with our house and like where we was renting. And so this was on a Friday. By the Monday, he was like, there's quite a few weird things going on. And I was like, yep, you're right. Okay. And I was like, let's explore it. And before I knew it, 6 weeks later, we was literally landing here. And I'd never been to Canada before. But at the time, Toronto ranked the highest as best city to live in.
Okay.
For lots of reasons, like safety, cost of living, which is not the case anymore. I know, it's hilarious, right? I know. Well, at the time, we could have sold our house and bought 3, and now we did sell our house and bought half.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, hindsight's wonderful, but it kind of just felt like everything was slotting into place. And we had a little moment at one point where our visas weren't figuring out in time for his job to like slot into place, and it almost fell through. And I think when something like that happens to you, and you sort of, you're scared, but you're excited, but you're like apprehensive all in one, and then the carpet almost comes out under you, and you're like, oh, actually, no, I really wanted to do that. So that was kind of helpful. And I mean, if I'd have known what would have unfolded, I would never have come here, and I would have been terrified to think that I'd be here for 9 years. But I think sometimes you just need that little next step to be okay, and you can do it. And that's what we did. Within 6 weeks.
Was the plan to come over and just continue your career, but over here essentially?
No, the plan was that it's kind of funny if you emigrate having just got married and you have like a real reset. It was like a really interesting period in time because we could like reset our finances. It's like, okay, we're renting out our house at home. We have this budget to relocate. Rent is cheaper here. Like, so everything was kind of working in our favor. So we sort of factored in an income for me, and I fell pregnant in the meantime, and it would just felt like everything was kind of working out perfectly to make that all happen. And I never really thought about working here. I was kind of like, well, I'm pregnant now. Well, we're set up financially, and I will have a great time. I'll be like super mum, and that this will be my full-time job, and then we'll come straight back.
Yeah.
And that none of that happens.
Of course.
Best laid plans.
Yeah. So then so as you were going through all these transitions and moves and stuff like that, did you have any of the kind of human design stuff going on?
No.
Or no?
No, that come way later.
Yeah. So how did you find yourself into, well, I guess essentially the work that you do today?
The short answer is a series of breakdowns, big and small, that all led to like huge breakthroughs.
Okay.
And it was like a slow unraveling of situations. I arrived here pregnant, but unfortunately, about 6 weeks into living here, I lost that child, and I was about 5.5 months pregnant. So you can imagine
Yeah.
that was like the most intense thing I've ever been through, on top of moving countries and then just sort of grieving this isn't how any of this was supposed to go. I'm feeling quite frustrated and bitter for a while.
Yeah.
But then I went on to have 3 children really quickly, very unexpectedly each time. I mean, I could do a whole story on that, but I was left in the pandemic, January 2020, expecting my third child. So in January 2020, I had 3 kids under 3.5. And I was terrified because the first sort of experiences taught me that it doesn't matter how desperately you want them, it still could be really, really hard.
Yeah.
And our third was a complete surprise. It was like I was 3 months pregnant, thought I was really ill, and it turns out I was just pregnant again.
Okay.
So my youngest 2 were like 13.5 months apart, I think, like as close to Irish twins as you can get.
Yeah.
And my plan was have all my family come out and support me like endlessly for this long postpartum period I was going to take in 2020. But again, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And instead, my mum arrived on the day that the pandemic sort of officially started and left somewhat quickly after that. And that was like the final straw for me, where I was like left on my own with all the 3 kids. I mean, everyone knows how that went, but it felt, again, like very frustrating for me, because I was like, this isn't how this story is supposed to go. And every time I get ahead, something like happens. And in fact, it's like probably about 4 years ago to the day, pretty much, I had this like sink or swim moment. A friend of mine had just turned into a coach, and that makes it sound like she had just retrained to be a coach and changed careers, and she had said, like, I think this could really help you. And everyone around me was like, no, you just need a break, you're just tired. And I was like, maybe. Anyway, thank God, like, the coaching path saved my life. And that happened at the same time as I had discovered human design online. And I quickly, it made everything make sense, and nothing in my life at that time made sense. So it was a real comfort to be like, okay, this is why I operate this way. Okay, like my career no longer makes sense to have 3 young children, to be hairdressing in an environment where like that's probably the worst thing I can be doing, and I'm like literally not allowed. And so this sense of looking for purpose and looking for myself after just kind of losing myself 4 times in a row very quickly.
Yeah.
It felt like a bit of a lifeline, and like okay, now I understand, and I'm not doing it wrong. I'm just doing it my way, and that there's not necessarily anyone else to look to that is me. Like, this is just who I am. And so I found it so comforting, and I circled back to that. I eventually decided I wanted to be a coach, and then transition careers over the pandemic. And then I kind of circled back to it, and I was like, hang on a minute, this is what really helped me. This is such a great way to get to know clients, no matter what they want to do, no matter what they're working on. And I'm just fascinated. Like, anytime I have someone's birthday, I'm like, ooh, let's guess the time.
Exactly.
Or like, when they share, I don't know, a celebrity birthday or something online, or you can find out. I'm like, let me find out. So I just kind of had this like healthy obsession with each part of it. And then I started guessing people's, I started like testing myself to like guess. And yeah, I think it also connected me with my intuition of kind of knowing not just what is good for me, but being able to tap into that for other people, and being able to trust it when it doesn't, like, there's not sense and intuition don't necessarily like link together. But often I find the most sense I can find in a situation is from my own intuition. And I think that has kind of followed me around through this whole lifetime. Probably I've had a stronger connection to it than I realized before I even knew what that meant. And now I find myself often, as you said to me, I'm trying all these different modalities and whatnot, and then circling back to myself.
Yeah.
So I think if I can help people connect to that or explain how that might show up for them, I think it's like the biggest gift, because I don't think I've ever heard someone say I followed my intuition and I messed up. It's like,
No,
I
it's so
didn't
true.
follow my intuition and then I circled back to it maybe, but yeah, like we want to make sense in our logical mind of stuff, but actually what's intuitive often doesn't make sense, or it makes sense to you and it doesn't make sense to everyone else, and everyone else wants to make sense of it. So yeah, that's my fast track of how we got here.
No, I appreciate it. And I obviously realize there are many details in between. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the human design, because there, a lot of what you just said, and the longtime listeners of the show would, have heard me speak about human design in the past, just from my own experience. And we've had one other guest on speak specifically about it. But there are always new people coming to the show. And I think, as you and I were speaking about, or at least what I was saying before we hit record, I think we always need reminders of these different modalities and practices, and they just serve as almost like mental resets, or like just to put us back on track. And I find human design is just this. I think you said the words like this: it all made sense. And as humans, it's like we're, and this is just my projection, of course, but it's like we're trying to figure things out all the time. We're doing our best for the most part. And there's just so much comparison, whether we're trying not to do that or we are. But I mean, it naturally happening where, especially in entrepreneurship, it's like, the hustle this, hustle that, right? Which, since you did my reading, that's like the polar opposite of how I made up. So that's something that I've always been struggling with around, like, aggressively, doing outreach and this and that, where I'm like, I'm actually repelling people doing that, knowing like my profile and makeup, and there are other ways to do it. So that's a bit of a long ramble I'd love to get into, from your perspective, like, what is human design, as a reminder to all of us, and for those who've never heard the terminology, and like, how do you suggest people just kind of get started and to go down that path? Because I think it's just, it can be really transformative and just such a beautiful, valuable tool to have.
Yeah, I like to think of I like to think of the way I share human design as like making it make as much sense and as simple as possible, because it's kind of like a foreign language. You're like, I'm a manifesting generator or a projector, and from the outside that can be a bit off-putting. Like, what does that mean? Like, like, that's too much. I don't know if I want to figure that out. So I always say, with the caveat that human design is going to make everything make sense, because it's who you are at your core already. It's like we already know who we are. We've just spent a lot of time being told we should be someone different, or wronging ourselves from the outside, the inside out, or, looking around and saying, well, they're doing it that way, so therefore I must. So what I think it does, especially when you first find it, is essentially it's like a blueprint for who you are. And it's a combination of I Changa, astrology, like energy. There's another piece to it, which is just, quantum physics. It's like all of those things brought together. And I'll also preface, I really know nothing about astrology. I love being a bystander on it, but it's really about the energy in which you came into the planet on that specific day, and how everything correlates in your like makeup, your aura, your personality. And then even within all of that, you're still an individual. So you might be predisposed to operating a certain way, but you might love music and hate dance. And someone else with a very similar chart could love music, and, it could be the other way around, or, have totally different interests. So I guess what I like to say is that, like, it's going to make you like, it's not going to be like, oh God, like, that's who I am. Oh my God, I have to go change everything. It'll be like, oh, okay, thank God. It's kind of like, it's
what gives us permission to be us.
Yeah, that is it. That is it in a nutshell. And it's like, for me, it just resonated so deeply, and I felt like I took an exhale rather than feeling like I wasn't enough or doing it right. And for me as a manifesting generator, the thing that had kind of followed me around in my life was I always loved trying different things. And I always loved like bringing them together and like, I don't know, creating a new way of doing something or sharing all of these things to other people. And that is part of who I am and how I'm made up. But the shadow side of that is that I would often get told, oh, why can't you stick at one thing? But I'm really not meant to. And so it gave me permission to take on those things that people had said or that I'd thought were like bad and actually own them and be like, yeah, I'm going to try everything. I might not do everything forever, and that's fine. Like, that's who I am. And like, sometimes I even say that out loud, like to myself or to other people. Yeah, that's who I am.
Yeah.
Rather than like, oh, you're fatty. I'm like, well, fatty's a good thing to me. Like, so yeah, I think it's like, it's a combination of what your energy is like. So how you share your energy with the world and how it's experienced from the outside. It is your personality type. There's so many intricacies of it, like what your gifts are. There's like your purpose, which I always like to preface with, that feels super heavy to be like, this is your purpose on earth. But it's more about like a theme that runs through your life. And what else? What other pieces are there? Like the way that you manifest, the way you share your emotions, the way your intuition shows up in your life experience, in your body even. And in answer to your question about how do you get started, there is so much incredible information out there on the internet, and it's all great. Like you can go to several, I should probably give you the exact ones that you could share that I recommend, but Jenna Zoe is a great one. There's, oh my God, I've got the name on the tip of my tongue, but it's Joan something. I've just got Joan of Arc in my head. So
okay. Yeah, you could send me the links and I'll put them in the show notes.
But there's a whole bunch of places where you can type in all of your details. And also don't worry if you get your birth date. Your birth date you should have right. But your birth time, if it's off by like an hour or you're not exactly sure, you can always fiddle with it because often not that much changes within a couple of hours.
Okay.
So yeah, I've had to like kind of help someone guess before. Anyway, all this to say you can put in all of your details and you can get great information, and it's broken down into sections and it explains it. What it generally doesn't do is explain it in context with everybody else. So how you fit into like the human race, if you like. And it's kind of like, I think I said this to you in your reading, that like it's like you have all the pieces of the puzzle and you can see them there, that they're separate. And you're like, oh, I know there's a tree in that puzzle. I know there's the sun and whatever, but you don't know how that picture comes together and what it fully looks like. So what I help people do, and what other people who do what I do helps with, or you can again just pay for this as a compilation on the internet. That's usually the part that that you pay for. It's like bringing it all together and making it make sense as like a unique individual. And so, but even still, just finding out that free information of each piece of the puzzle is so helpful. Even if it's like a paragraph breakdown, like that is still really great information. And then what's great about having a reading is often you get like the intuitive insights of the person who's doing it, and then you get to ask questions and you can go deeper depending on how obsessed you get.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is like there's like many things. There's kind of the surface level version, and then there are always opportunities to go deeper and like really kind of dive into specific areas and so forth. But like what you're saying, I fully encourage everyone to go out and at least at the very least get kind of that main profile that, to your point, like even just those kind of shorter description paragraphs throughout the profile. Like I'm willing to just put money on that. Anyone who does that is like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
like that makes sense.
I will double your bet.
Yeah. And it's such a freeing feeling.
Yeah.
And to your point, like I like your language around it. Like it's not like, especially when you think big things like purpose and whatnot, it's not like, oh, I've got to completely shift everything in my life. It's more, it's reaffirming what you already know these things. It's kind of connecting the dots. And
Mhm.
at least for me, I find now I'm just a lot more self-aware and cognizant as things arise that like, okay, I feel it, first of all, that I'm going against kind of my natural design. And now I've got some like language and some information or knowledge to back that with, to then just take a subtle, shift in approach or
Mhm.
whatever it is, like whether that's processing the situation or thinking of the next steps and stuff like that,
Mhm.
which is something I wanted to talk to you about, because I'd love to apply your thoughts around human design and frankly any of your other modalities, but just take those practices and get your insight on how you would use them in today's world where we're just going through and about to go through so much more change and uncertainty and like rapid technology advancements, like a lot of good things, but it's just, as you know, as humans, we don't do super well with a bunch of change and uncertainty, which is what all of this innovation is doing at the same
Mhm.
time. So from your teaching and the work that you do, maybe it's just asking you personally, or if you do this with clients, but like, how would you approach human design from like this context?
I think like, looking back, I wish it was something that we gave to kids at school when you're making like big life decisions, like even just
Yeah.
what subjects should I study, like because there's probably a correlation between what you're drawn to in terms of what you love and what you're best suited to in terms of industry, what's potentially available. Even as an entrepreneur myself, it's like there's still things that run as a theme as what works for me. And we're so often put into like a box of like, okay, if
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur you must be like this, if you're going to study to be a doctor you must do it this way. And if there is that change, I think it would be so helpful to help younger people
Yeah.
have access to that as like a, because it took me till 35 to even know it existed.
Yeah. No, it's the same.
And I was like, oh great, but like wish I'd known this 5 years ago
Yeah.
or even 10. So I think making it, there being more awareness around it, period. And also not like, oh my God, you have to go on this massive self-discovery journey, just like, hey, here's your human design. You
Mhm.
know how they do a lot of, or at least when I was at school, it was like, here's industries you're suited to, or like all these checkbox lists, but it wasn't based on who you are. It was just like what boxes you ticked.
Yeah.
So I think that would be super interesting. And also, I find people come to me when they're going through a change, or like I'm turning 40 this year. So I've had a lot of friends in and around this time, want to know things because they're like, okay, I'm entering this new phase of life, or
Yeah.
they're passing through a stage of parenthood, or maybe trying to be a parent and it's not working out. And they're looking for like, a sense of self in the experience. And so I tend to find when people do go through change, and they realize that this exists and that I do it, we tend to get into these conversations, or we work together. And so I think it is, now you mention it, like such a cool tool to be able to do it with that in mind. And I've done many reading or like look people up. I mean, my whole database is just like full of anyone who would allow me to have their details. And what's interesting is I'm noticing there's different, like I notice patterns after a while. So I'll do like a whole bunch of friends that have some big things in common. So going back to your last question, even if you just look up your energy type and your
Mm.
profile, which is your profile is essentially your personality, those two things are such big things to know about yourself. And I wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, if different types of people, personalities, energies are going to change in terms of percentages, because at the moment, generators make up the large population of the planet. So,
Yeah.
yourself being a projector and me being a manifesting generator, like you're rarer than me, but there's less manifesting generators than there are generators. And I really believe that is going to really shift. I think we're going to have way more projectors coming in, and I've started to notice that in the people that I've done. In fact, what was interesting, I did a workshop and everyone there was a projector except one person and me.
Wow.
It's like, wow, like,
Okay.
what are the chances? So it's really cool to see what people are attracted to each other, what people are attracted, to an offering even,
Yeah.
and um, what, like what people in the 90s, what the majority of them are versus people who are born in the 80s
Hmm.
versus, everything that's coming next. So
Yeah.
it's so fun to dissect. It's a
Yeah. No,
little
no, it's
piece of the world I have to look at.
it's fascinating.
Mm.
I mean, I think so, irrespective of your type or your profile or an energy or I forget all the language, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
no,
your general kind of what, for
design,
projector, yeah,
blueprint.
design, blueprint.
Yeah.
How would you suggest for people to take that information and then I think maybe intentionally or actively like start to prepare their minds and their rituals and so forth to just almost like bulletproof their internal empire for all of the change that is happening because
Oh,
like
wow.
that's the I like to think of like there's facts and then there's all of the stuff that we just don't know what's about to happen. But for me, the facts are there's just going to be a lot more change and disruption. So
Hmm.
if we know that,
Hmm.
then I see my job for myself in my own mind is to do everything possible to be as mentally fit as possible and equip myself with as many tools to be
Hmm.
able to handle whatever kind of comes this way because I just think that we're either going to just be trying to survive over the next
Hmm.
decade or so with just everything that's happening, or we can thrive in it.
Hmm.
And I think it's up to us and all of, and when I say us, like the specific work that we all do to just at least provide our tools to the world and people that are out there so they can put their own kind of toolkit together and equip themselves.
So I guess I would say that I see human design as like self-discovery and like that connection to your own self, but also like
Yeah.
your own intuition. So how you show up in the world. But it's not like, I wouldn't say it's a modality or a tool that's going to help you move through the world. It will make you understand yourself, but then still you need, well, I believe everyone needs toolkits for their mental wellness.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
of course.
I can't remember how you said it, but it was so well put. So I like the things that I teach and I practice are daily tools because I see our mental fitness
Mm,
as important as our physical fitness. It's just the
yeah.
world hasn't got caught up to how important. I would say arguably mental fitness is more important than physical fitness because you move your body during the day unless you're completely sedentary,
Hmm.
but you might be having a horrible time in your mind and be at the sort of mercy of the outside world to keep that under wraps, or you might be at the mercy of medication or
Yeah.
anything else that's I'm all for whatever anybody needs to do to be in the best physical and mental condition. But, something that's external of you. Like,
Hmm.
imagine we lived in a world where none of that's available anymore and it's all down to us. Like, I like to rely on those things that I know I can do no
Yeah.
matter what. And so for me, that's like daily practices. It's like the way that you train your mind in like the everyday moments so that you're building up that resiliency for it's almost like you're practicing life for when something doesn't go so well rather
Yeah.
than being blindsided because most of the time when something doesn't go well, well, at least my experience has been you're totally blindsided. And now I feel a lot more mentally prepared and my life experience has taught me that I'm probably going to be okay in the end, but I will need to double down on this. And in the meantime, I'm like in training, basically.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I think, what that does is it allows us to stay ready, just like
Mhm.
from a physical fitness standpoint
Mhm.
or an athlete does. I mean, it's sure you can up the training depending on, if something's going on or whatever. But for the most part, if I keep the example of physical fitness, people that are fit can do things that people that aren't fit can't, or
Yeah.
if you're asked like, hey, we're going to go for this hike. Well, yeah, I might not like hike every single day of the week, and I can't do that all day, but like I can kind of hold my own and go and be active, I guess you can say, as an
Yeah.
example. And but you're right, like we don't look at our mind like that, because I think it's hard. First of all, it's hard. Like we can't see it until something physically manifests, and that
Hmm.
happens unfortunately to many, right? And then all of a sudden
Hmm.
you hit this wall and you have to deal with it. But there are so many tools, and I don't know. I feel like I know what you're saying around kind of the daily tools. Like for me, that's like breath work, and journaling is a staple for me, and
Hmm.
meditation and so forth, different visualizations and whatnot. But I also think that at the core of it, like the human design aspect of really knowing who I am and like how this all connects
Hmm.
is like one of the fundamental tools. Because if I'm using all of those other tools, I guess you can say,
Yeah.
against my makeup or the way
Yes,
I'm
you're right.
designed, then it becomes like
Out of alignment
yeah,
almost.
it's out of
Yeah.
alignment, and it's almost worse in a way. So it's like, but to your point, it's like you have to get, ironically, you have to get clear on the who am I question.
Yeah.
And I think human design can help with that. And then it's like surrounding yourself with good tools. What are those tools for you?
Very similar, actually.
Okay.
So the company or the program I run, which is called the Rise Collective, is basically those tools in essence that you do in the morning. So
Okay.
I would imagine that your listeners are familiar with things like the 5 a.m. club and
Yeah.
Miracle Morning. I basically run that, not at 5 a.m. Thank goodness, that's slightly too early to get together on Zoom with people, but we do meet at 6, and I'm basically guiding people through those practices. Another sort of thing that happened to me in the pandemic with, having all my children be so young in that period, the only time I had to myself, and I had a newborn for a lot of that, was like I had this window where she would sleep 6 till 7 when my husband was
Okay.
awake, but he hadn't started work. So I would just go down to the beach near where I live and just walk the boardwalk. Like it was just see the sunrise,
Yeah.
come back,
I've walked that
listen to
same
a
boardwalk many
yeah,
times. I
oh,
know what
it's
you're
so
talking
good.
about.
It's like the best place in the world. And it's like I would walk the boardwalk, watch the sunrise, have a podcast in my ears, or just enjoy silence for a minute. And I was like, if I can get that in, I can do anything. And
Yeah.
that turned into visualizing, that turned into meditating, that turned into like journaling. And so a combination of everything you just shared, I find are the things that keep you in a peak state. And peak state for some people is to like go like totally take over the world. And for some people, it's like cope with your children so you don't go mad.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
And everything in between. And so those practices for me, and again, there's still types of those things that I like more or I choose at different times. And it's also the other thing that ties it to human design is it's like it's that time to check in with your intuition where you have a bit of peace. You have like your brain is in such a like almost like pliable state first thing in the morning.
Hmm.
And what we normally fill it with is grabbing our phone. And I know I'm still guilty of this, and it's constant practice every day to fight against that. But if I can wake up, take some silence, sometimes it's just for me, it's silence before I host my calls, and then sort of ask, what do I need to know today? Like, how am I
Yeah.
feeling? What do I want to do about that? Thinking about the things that are going to be challenging in that day, like making mental decisions so that the whole day is rehearsed in the way I want it to go. I mean, what happens is sometimes very different, but I respond differently. And I love a lot of the way Joe Dispenza talks about this. So he talks about meditation being like a rehearsal. There's a
Yeah.
specific saying he says has escaped me, but essentially like meditation, rehearsing the way you want to show up,
Yeah.
and how like all of the thoughts that we think are 90% the thoughts that we had yesterday. So if you wanted to create a change, to do it in the state and the waves in which your brain are in the morning is like the easiest and the best time to do it. So, and for most parents, it's like maybe the only half an hour you're going to get
I'm so
on
happy
your
you
own.
totally. I'm so happy you brought that up, because of course in the work that I do around mental fitness routines and so forth, like, and having young children myself, and understanding that those mini humans can really rock our schedule and frankly take it over at a moment's notice,
Yep.
that it can be very easy to slip into, like, I don't want to say excuses, but slip into, well, I can't, like, I don't have the time to do that. And I get that. I also get that when you're sleep deprived and all of that, but there are solutions if we can believe that there are, I think, and that we can
Yes.
prioritize. And for you, it sounds like, okay, you found that little window, and it's not, 14 hours of personal development work, but it's like that hour or whatever it is in between, dictates the rest of the day. And it's possible is, I guess, the point that I want to leave everyone. And especially, I mean, I think all parents are superhumans to begin with, but especially mothers. You all have a whole other, I don't know how you do it. So the kind of, we're running out of time. So I do want to ask one big question, kind of tying it all together for you. Like what's the definition? And maybe this is your definition for yourself personally, but of a mentally fit mom. Like, what does that look like?
I think, that's such a great question. I think it's somebody who, I mean, I think it can be hard to hear, but like you have to choose to take that time for yourself. You have to choose it.
Yeah.
You have to ask for it. You have to advocate for it. You maybe have to keep saying that over and over and over, because I think it's never going to get given to you. And that's terrible English, but it's never going to be just handed to you. And I think there's such a narrative of like you hit motherhood and like you don't have time for anything anymore. And that's true too. But people will often say to me, I'm not a morning person, or my kids get up too early. And I'm like, exactly. So you're already up. Like, give yourself permission to take the 30 minutes, whether it's, saying to a partner, have them, whether it's putting the TV on, whatever it is, if we can operate from a full cup, then everyone wins. Like if you want help, you go to the person who's calm. If you want to be in the right energy, energy is infectious. And I think we think if we cater to everybody else, then we'll go fill up the cup. But actually, just by filling up our cup, everybody else wins. Like if it's a win for you, it's a win for them. And I think sometimes that gets lost, or we don't give ourselves permission. So I guess to be a mentally fit mum, it is to take that time. And it doesn't even have to be half an hour. It can be 10 minutes. It can be waking up, staying in bed for 2 seconds and just going, okay, what am I grateful for this morning? How do I want today to go? Like mentally scan through that and like take a couple of deep breaths. And we all have time for that. And I know it, because if we all go and look at our phones now, our screen times will be probably kind of scary. So
exactly.
It's what we swap. I think it's all about what we swap things out for. And that goes in terms of like, the money investment that we pay for things that are good for our well-being. And, often that means not doing something else. And likewise for time, it's a trade. I'm not going to look at my phone first thing in the morning and I'm give myself 10 minutes to do this. There's such a wealth of, again, free stuff on the internet, like Insight Timer, free breathwork stuff. I give so much away for free, and I know so many other people do. It's just choosing it, like choosing yourself. And I think for me, that circles back to human design, like figuring out who you are, connecting to your intuition, and choosing yourself, and remembering that you got to do it every day. Like you got to choose yourself every day. And it's hard.
Yeah. I see the episode title now. It's something to the effect of choosing yourself, every day. Right?
Yeah.
Francesca, this was
Thank
fun.
you.
I mean, we definitely could continue much longer, but I want to respect your time and
I appreciate it.
And just thank you for coming on, and thank you for just for you choosing yourself and going down the path of, I guess, curiosity and exploration to jump into these practices first and foremost for yourself, but then now obviously helping a bunch of other people, explore what's out there, because there's just so much that I feel like as humans, we just deserve to wake up feeling, great more days than not. And there's a lot that we can do that's literally at our fingertips. And I see it as our jobs to just help people see what those things could be, I guess you could say. So thank you for your work.
And thank you to you. It's nice to know that first of all, that like men are talking about this kind of thing as well, and that you've created a hub where someone can come and explore that curiosity in so many different ways. I think that's so cool. And in terms of the everyday, that's kind of what we all want, isn't it? You don't want to wait till something happens to feel good. You want to feel good now in pursuit of what you're working on. And I think that's probably where like our messaging, among other things, crosses over. So yeah, I hope people can take something away to know that wherever you're at, you can like seek some fulfillment and sense of self and purpose and so on. So thank you so much. This was so nourishing, and I hope it's helpful to people.